All right, everybody, we are back again, but this time something completely different. It is 2.1, season 2.1 of the Coach's Compass, and this one, we're talking everything retirement, right? We're talking all lines of retirement, and that's going to be by me, myself, Coach Coop, and Coach Tara. She is going to help us with talking about the other side of life, right? Because like we said, when we started this Coach's Compass thing, it was me and Jay. We're trying to figure out what do we do outside of playing football. What is the next step for us outside of life and trying to find our own identity, because we are strength and conditioning coaches, but there is a lot more to it that we do. And then also just knowing how to navigate through. And I think it was super important because obviously we had Tara on earlier and we connected with everything going on because she's talked to a lot of athletes that are dealing with this side of things of what to do after football or what to do after your sport, whatever sport you play. And so we decided that we're going to start talking about the nitty gritty of retirement. So Tara, what made you so excited about wanting to talk about retirement and helping out the athletes that are going through this stage?
I started helping other athletes and really digging into this from I guess an athlete development pathway perspective. I'm used to helping build athletes from the ground up. It doesn't mean you're not an athlete anymore when you stop your sport. So life continues. So then what? So I started to get involved in the then what on a number of levels. Second chance sports like bobsleigh, skeleton, to helping athletes kind of come back and change their bodies and find purpose, and advocacy work. It runs the gamut. I'm still in it. So yeah, it's personal, it's professional, it's all the things.
Is there like any common trend or any common theme that you're seeing that athletes are kind of like, this is helping them get past things, or this is like the common theme that they're struggling with, like when they're coming outside of sports? Like, is it like a financial thing, or is it just like, hey, I'm no longer like, my label is no longer an athlete, or is it like now they have so much time they don't know what to do with themselves, or like what, like is there like a certain area that's like one main area that everyone's like kind of like down?
I would say all the things you said, and I know you personally are going through this yourself, so you're living retirement. And so I would say all those things are there. I think the most profound thing initially is, what is my value tied to? When you mentioned this last time we chatted, like living inside the bubble. It is a bubble. You don't know anything different when you're in there. It's fabulous. I mean, there's all sorts of, you meet some great people. It's exciting when you're playing sport you're in. It's great to win. It's great to lose. You're this team, this group of people that you're going to war with every day. And you've got a real reason to train and be fit because you're you're doing it for other people. There's so many different things, and there's all lots of opportunities in that. And people seem to really like you and gravitate you while you're doing it. And hope and pray at that time that it's genuine. And then all of a sudden you're done with that sport, and maybe the people suddenly vanished. The folks that you thought were really there for you, or that were truly your friends, or truly the people that you counted on, suddenly they're not there. They're not that interested. They're on to the next shiny object. And I think that's really devastating. As much as you sort of feel you're aware of it in the time, that's a big one. So then, do I matter? And so oftentimes there's, let alone the large life change that somebody's undertaken just to stop playing. Like, okay, it's time. My body's quit. I quit, or I just had enough, or I reached my, what you feel is the ceiling of your potential at that time. There's the, oh my gosh, where did everybody go scenario that you're navigating. And I thought I mattered. And so I can't do this thing now, or I don't know that I can do this thing, or I decide not to do this thing, but does that mean now I lose all my friends? And so there's this real sort of identity crisis. And so in addition to sort of the physiological shock of I'm not training that way, there's this other stressor that's, I would say, really emotionally taxing and really challenging for people to wrap their heads around, is this change in your identity and value to others and maybe yourself. And so I think that leads people, or can lead people down a pretty dark, if not sort of, you don't have a good home base and you don't have that good support and folks around you to come off of what's, you used to train like this and now you used to train like that. and the potential health consequences of all of that, but also just the emotional. That's what I see as sort of the biggest. And so I witnessed the really great stories, and that's super for me.
No, I think for sure. I mean, even when you think about like a lot of these guys that are former contact sport athletes, how do they balance out, now that they're no longer a contact sport athlete and no longer have legal violence, right? There's still that pent up, energy or anger or whatnot. There's no place to let it out now. So like even ones that are in relationships, outside relationships, like how do you deal with that? Like where do you channel that energy to now? Like yeah, you can go throw around some weights, but there's nothing that can compare to, I mean, I know a lot of football players that are out there will understand this, like just running into somebody. Like everyone thinks we're crazy because we do it, but like it is the one way that you can legally just beat the shit out of somebody and like it's cool. Like everybody's fine with it. But then once it's gone, like there is no like, yeah, you can join boxing, you can do MMA, right? But like, and that's legal violence too, to an extent. But with football, I know also with hockey, with rugby, with like those are like sports that like it's hard when you let go because there's like you just want to one time like just run and tackle somebody like that, like especially as a defensive player. Like sometimes you just get that urge, like yo, if I just tackle this shit, if I just knock this person's the head off their shoulders, like then we'll be good.
Yeah, no, I 100%. I think and there's a lot of roots of that from a physiological perspective. I think I touched on it the last time we talked about an area of interest or emerging sort of work I'm in is sort of helping people when they're not performing well and managing stress and navigating stress. And that is still, that's something that we can is sort of physiologically, what does this look like? And from a body perspective, when you have this outlet for this aggression and then all of a sudden it's taken away. There are physiological reasons for the kind of change, for the behavior and the emotional pieces that come down that can have health implications. And I don't know if this is the time and place to talk about that. What you say is really, really profound. Is that so? I remember when my husband, retired, and I'm like, for me, and I was helping design the training for 11 of his 14 years. And it was a lot, and as a family, you sacrifice a lot to allow this person to play. It's exciting, it's amazing. I love sport. It was obviously what I did for my whole career, so I got it. I'm sure I was voraciously at every game, analyzing movement, and your hip's tight, and this is happening. Why aren't you gaining weight? And always figuring out that side of it. Like I was immersed fully, and I loved it. I know lots of other significant others didn't. They're like, this is ridiculous. I'm sitting in the stands. It's horrible weather. Like from the night and day watching football. I can't wait for my husband to retire so he can help me in the yard. And we can go on vacations and we can do all those things. So there's an expectation that, when someone retires, that they can just go and do normal things. The person who's just retired doesn't feel that. They don't even know what that is. Over like to have a normal family. And so you're talking about letting to hit somebody. How do you suddenly go from, you're hitting people for a living and then you're planting petunias in the garden and mowing the lawn all the time? It's a really different. Okay, so what do you do with your anger?
Yeah, so we're talking a little bit about just like what to do as a contact athlete. What happens? So like we don't know.
Well, exactly. So from a physiological perspective, I'm just quickly touch on it because we can get into this in more detail at another time. But you've got testosterone through the roof. Growth, you're a raging bull. There's a bit of obviously, some people talk about a dopamine addiction to doing like crazy adrenaline driven types of things. And you've got that outlet, the high a game brings you, the high, that sort of I guess, aggressive state and that super exciting feeling of banding together like warriors out there in a field gives you to now your wife, girlfriend, or whoever is asking to mow the lawn and do dishes. And it is so not the same thing. So, and what do? You've got, and I lived the training part. I
designed, like I'd worked with lots of athletes designing their training to play football and other sports. I felt super prepared even as a spouse and as in like, hey, this is what the training looks like. This is how we have to come down off the training. And these are the types of things you need to do to kind of counteract that, that high you're having but now you don't have it anymore. But I was still wrong, like way off the mark there in terms of, managing the changes that happened in my significant other at the time coming out of football. So yeah, you're right. The lifting weights and whatnot can help be some sort of an outlet for the aggression, but oftentimes people miss the high of being in the mix of all the crazy excitement. And so things like, do you, do you take up another sport? I've seen a lot of folks come out of football and whatnot into bobsleigh and skeleton, which is something that I've spent a lot of time in my career working with. Second chance sport where they have to lift that hard, they run that fast, they have to hit stuff, they hit a sled, they don't hit each other, but there's an aspect of that does address that aggressive nature and the need to have that outlet. Otherwise they may not use that aggression appropriately, which happens, right? Like all of a sudden you're asked to plant petunias and not hit a guy when your wife's got you mowing lawn or doing gardening and all that kind of stuff like that. And we laugh about it, but it's actually true because I've watched, a lot of
Yeah.
marriages end poorly. I think I gave that stat last time we talked about the 83% of marriages end in divorce after retirement from pro sport because, yeah, there's the identity crisis, but, we didn't talk about the fact that there may not be a healthy outlet for all of the aggression or what is feeding that incredible high that comes out of sport performance. Like where do you get that next? And so people are spinning their tires and hopefully they're not going and driving over someone with their car or something like that because they're so frustrated or angry or coming off this really physiological kind of tsunami that they've been riding, essentially like surfing for a long time. So how do you deal with that? Well, hopefully you have a plan before it stops. Sometimes that isn't someone's choice. The career ends before they want it to end and they're not there. Continuing to train like you trained for a period of time can at least help you come down off the physiological. um, there is a progressive decline in how you have to train to manage the weight gain and all that kind of stuff. There are some set things that you can do and certainly happy to talk about that in more detail. But it is getting yourself involved with an active, I don't know, can you play football after? Probably not, if depending on why you quit. Is it getting into a job that has a whole pile of excitement? I know your job, right? Like we've talked about, like you're in the mix of doing a lot of
Yeah.
strength and conditioning. It's a very high pace. That probably helps a little bit, like being in the action. Are there opportunities for athletes to be in the action, whether they're, they go help coach, not quite the same thing, but you're kind of involved at arm's length, training. Can you still continue to train in a training group? Like you've talked about some alumni groups saying they get together, they still lift, they still spend time together, they use their energy towards something that's more productive. Maybe they are fundraising, maybe they're coaching, maybe they I don't know, start up a rec hockey game or something like that. That doesn't replace it entirely, and that's the thing to figure out, like how do you navigate this and who is addressing that from a professional perspective, like medically, physiologically. That's something that I've started to work with more and more athletes with, like how to come down off of that incredible sort of physiological, what's the word I'm looking for? Just it's a big thing that you've been training like that, and how do you come down off of that too? Um, and to manage that and not have sort of considerable health issues after and gain a bunch of weight and get unhealthy. There is a way to that. If some of those folks weren't sliding, I don't know honestly where they would be. Like I don't know what they would be doing. Sliding is something that they need to be doing to help them be healthy and productive. And so, but that isn't for everybody. Like basically, I'm saying I don't entirely know. I'm just identifying that these are concerns, and I can speak to the science of it more than I can speak to necessarily what to do about it on the community support side. I can just say it's incredibly necessary for the health, well-being, and safety really of everybody involved. You're not tackling someone on the sidewalk. I hope you haven't tackled anybody on the sidewalk yet.
No, 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 no. I still I want to be a free person, right? I want to still be able to enjoy time with my daughter. So I feel like tackling somebody would put me behind bars or something like that. And
I
I
know.
know for
We're
sure
laughing.
I wouldn't last in jail either. Like I wouldn't, it's just not a place for me. I can't be locked
Well,
up.
we're
I can't
laughing,
do
but this is
that. Look, yeah,
well,
it's
we
the
laugh
reality
about it,
though.
but
I
it's
think that's
actually
why
serious. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I think it's so important that we actually like have these conversations now because we're seeing it more and more, like with the development of CTE. right? That's more and more studies are coming out from that. And a lot of athletes, taking their lives, right, from different things that they've gone through, right? Athletes going through domestic violence, not even just on the football side of things, but on all athletes. There's so many different avenues that we have to, I feel like, talk about, because somebody's got to be out there to give athletes a space to talk and a space to learn about other
Mhm.
ways to go about life outside of their sport. Because I know we touched on it a little bit, like you saying, like having a plan for when your sport is over. We're never taught that. Like, we're only taught to like focus on plan A. Like, yeah, a little bit nowadays, since there's NIL deals, right? You have like plan B, like how to set up with the money and stuff, but that still doesn't come unless you do really well at your sport. So like a lot of our identity is wrapped up on being really, really good at what we do. But then why would we think about life outside of it? Because like, to us, there is no real end game to it, right? You think that you'll be good because you got money afterwards and everything will be fine. You've got a good family, like everyone's living good, but there is the part that comes down to like, some things do happen while you're playing. Like, sometimes you are in relationships and you have a kid, and then once you guys are done, like, you guys break up and then things get tough, right? Trying to figure out like, how do I navigate through that? Or like, there's so many different avenues, I feel like, that us as former athletes and people that dealt with athletes are trying to understand. And I think the first part of understanding is that us actually talking about what we're actually going through, and
Yeah.
what those athletes are going through themselves, and having athletes on and having people like yourself on that have worked with athletes to kind of get a full understanding, and also help the people that are involved, like you said, with the community, people that are in touch with these athletes, and kind of get the signs and like know when, like, hey, maybe they need a little bit extra help, maybe they need like somebody else to lean on and talk to about, when football or basketball or whatever sport it is over. So I think that's why it's super cool that we're doing this, and I'm really, really excited, because I know for myself it ends up just being a therapy session for myself. So that's the really good thing,
Yeah.
and just learning a lot more. Just because I think that there's always a place that maybe makes it a little bit easier for other athletes to come out and speak out about what they're going through. Through seeing another athlete like themselves being vulnerable and open about what they're going through. So hopefully, some of my stuff that I'm going through, like all the athletes that are out there listening, and all the other people that are out there listening, can take from this and learn and find help for others, and then come out and speak for yourself too. I know I've never been one to kind of put myself in vulnerable places to talk about anything that I've gone through, but I think this, with the Coach's Compass, with being able to talk to coaches on the strength and conditioning side, has helped a lot. And now doing this is going to be another change in life. So I
I
think
think
that's
it's
the
incredible.
wrap up we needed right there.
Yeah, well, I agree. So I think a couple things just to quickly for people to recognize is that this is a thing, and that when you retire from sport, there's going to be a physiological cascade that's going to happen that needs to be addressed. And so planning for that with a training plan after, outlets for that aggression, management obviously around the potential, if you've got like the post concussion type syndrome, if that's a thing, obviously hopefully that's being managed within the sport so that there's continued support thereafter. There's the how to train, how to come out of that training, and how to stay healthy and still have control of your body, because your body does feel probably like a bit of an alien planet after you're done training, because you've been training like that for so long. So there's that piece of it to talk about, but that is intimately tied to some of the emotional changes that happen, because as I mentioned in the previous podcast, some of the physiological changes and hormonally drive the behavior. So you've got to have folks around you with the discernment to know, is this a hormonal crisis that you're in that's driving this behavior? Is it it's a kind of like a Venn diagram. There's the loss of identity and the change in identity, and that's going to immediately be like, whoa, I've got to change my life here, and what does that even mean? And all the different pressures from the outside of, yeah, those are my friends, they're not. Or wife at home saying, great, now you're done playing. And when I say playing, I'm saying, I know a lot of athletes get the gears for, it's like your little boys playing, like you get to go play your games all the time for a living, and it's not taken seriously. I know that's like have to grow up now. And so there's that pressure. That's not how I feel, but I have heard that there's a lot of pressure from people like, okay, now you can go get a real job or do a real thing. You don't have to play with your friends anymore. There's that. And so all of a sudden that can be, if that's all an athlete's known, how do you legitimize that you've had this career? Like, this is a career. This inspires, so many wonderful things come out of the sport journey: leadership, discipline, camaraderie, there's so many incredible lessons that come from sport. Like, how can you leverage that journey in a more positive way professionally, and so that you don't just feel like you were a gladiator for hire or something like that. I mean, I've heard so many different narratives come out of the sport journey, and I don't know of very many people that are wrangling that. A few conversations with some medical doctors around, hey, these are some things that happen, and I hope someone's helping athletes transition from that high training load, intensity, volume, all of that, to something healthy. And that's something that I'm trying to do with some that are coming off of sport. But all of those other things feed into the trajectory of good health that you hope someone's going to get onto. And that includes, like, taking, what are the positive things you can do with your sport journey, and identifying that and working with people before that happens. Hopefully that's happening in your sport. You're out there, advocating, doing work for charity, or helping coach camps for kids. You're developing other athletes. Maybe that is happening already. How can you continue that in a more meaningful way? That does help. But we back to your original question, the aggression and whatnot, that is something, as topic unto itself, that we really should talk about, like, because that has immediate implications. You don't want to quit football and then go hurt someone or hurt yourself. What can we do? So maybe that's a good topic unto itself, to just talk about the aggression, and why that happens, and then what you can do about it, to making sure that you do have that good community support, making sure you have, kind of career counseling, if you will, as to, like, what are the unique things that you particularly, I'll just ask you, turn it back on you for a moment, like the unique things that you have, Coop, that made you the great athlete, like, that aggression, that, it may be tenacity, it may be something that really made you ferocious, like a ferocious beast on the field. Where do you put that on a resume? Like, how do you use that? And so, knowing yourself and what made you a great player, you know, there's something to that, to be like, okay, let's harness the good from that and then try to tame the not good parts of it. Like, sport gives some folks a real outlet for some of their maybe unsavory behaviors too, right? Like I said, if they weren't playing football, maybe they would be in jail. Like, if they weren't, I hope not. But there's a lot of folks
Right.
that come to play sport that already have some pretty difficult, challenging pasts, and may not have a positive outlet to deal with that. And sport and the aggressiveness that is needed to be a good athlete sometimes, is a good place or an outlet for people to release, as you described, some of the challenges they've had. I'm not sure how to put that in a positive way, but I'll turn it back to you.
I think we touched on it all. I think that's a good place to let everybody know that, hey, we're going to talk everything retirement, right? In 2.1 of the Coach's Compass is going to be bringing on guests that are retired, bringing on guests that are working with retired athletes, and me myself talking about what retirement has been like for myself. And like you said, how do I put that on a resume? How do I use what I've used with my aggression to help me with my everyday life and in my job, and just relationships I have with everybody, and even with my daughter? How is that helping me to raise her? Uh, I think it's going to be super important and super fun to just hear, what I've done good and what I've done wrong, and just learn from it all. And that's why I think I'm most excited about it. Is just like, hey, I'm gonna put it out there, like what all I've been through, and see how we can help others. And then we're going to reach out to some cool guests and get them on, and then we're going to roll from there.
Amazing. Sounds good. And I love what you just said about your daughter. We raised a son who's now 21, and growing up in that bubble, and trying to what are the lessons, like, I'm always thinking what he sees from our lives, like what does he get out of or internalize from watching how his dad grew up and played, and what his dad's doing now for work, how the weird things that I've certainly done to help athletes, like in the places I found myself, in gyms with giant bodies, like squatting 600 plus pounds, like why am I doing that? And what in the world is wrong with mom? Like, why does she do this? And what, what does he expect for himself in his sport journey? Like, I'm always reverse engineering it in my brain to be like, okay, like, so what are the positives? What are the things that sport teach? And, how do you go on and take your experiences and impart that to the next generation and be, um, a good dad, a good, like, husband, wife, whatever it is. I see that now because I'm seeing things through his eyes, and as to how he's processed what's gone on with our lives and our family. And as I mentioned, we didn't end up staying married. And I've learned a lot from that journey, more probably from that journey than I did within. So I feel like helping families is a thing that could come out of this. This topic could solve a lot of ills of the world.
I told you, there's a lot of places that we're gonna go with this whole thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Thanks for
super excited
involving
about
me.
this, especially, of course. And no, thank you for bringing this up to me, because again, it was something that I was interested in, and we obviously clicked on it on the first interview. And here we are. Now we're just gonna roll with it. But thank you to everybody that listened in. Remember, hit that like, subscribe, comment button, turn on the alerts. Don't know what days we're going to use for this one, because obviously the Coaches Compass, the other episodes drop on Tuesdays and Fridays. So maybe we'll drop on Wednesday or Thursday, maybe even a Monday. We'll see. We'll figure it out. But until then, look forward to more and more talks about the retirement.
Me too. Okay.